Good evening. We're going to reconvene the board meeting in open session now. And we've already done the roll call. All directors are present. And please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are. They were distributed by Joelle. There are two captions, item number 10 and item number 11, that were edited slightly for content on the recommended action and the title. And then there's a new edited version of item number 10, Exhibit A, both of which have been distributed. And Joelle, are those posted to the website at this point?
No, they are not posted to the website, but they will be posted within 5 days.
Okay.
Okay, maybe when we get to those items, we can bring them up. Can we bring the revisions up on the screen just so everybody can see them?
Would you like for me to do that now or
when we get? I think when we get to those items.
When we get there? Okay.
Yeah, it'd be helpful.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, well, then we are ready for oral communications. Joelle, can you read the instructions, please? For oral communications.
The board welcomes your public comment on the consent calendar, information items, closed session items, or matters not listed on today's agenda. Please raise your hand, or if you're calling in, please push *9. And Chair Paul, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
Very good, thank you. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Do any of the directors wish to pull anything from the consent calendar? And we can, I don't see any requests. And we can ask if there are any members of the public that wish to pull anything from the consent agenda. If so, please raise your hand.
Chair Paul, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
I make a motion to approve.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to second with a comment.
Yes, please.
My comment is the humor bone in my system gets triggered pretty easily. And in one section of the minutes, they make reference to Sleepy Hollow Weir, and the spelling is Sleepy Hollow Weird. I'm not even suggesting a change. I like it. So that's why I approve it.
So your motion is to leave it as it is.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Any more comments? Then let's have a roll call vote, please.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Wright, Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Roberson,
Yes.
Director Malik,
Yes.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes,
The motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
thank you. And now we come to a very, very interesting part of our meeting tonight, and that is about the district's redistricting.
Yes. So we're assisted here today with Jean Gobelet from the demographers, and I also saw Robin. Yeah, Robin's been moved over. Robin Merrill with our demographers who've done a masterful job of leading this. Shout out to Joel Pablo for his organization strengths in pushing this thing through. And with that, I think, Jean, you're going to lead this off, correct?
Yes, and I think Robin is going to share her screen. Is that right, Robin?
Want me to start sharing now, Jean?
Yes, if you will.
And
Excuse me.
during this presentation at the end, Joelle, if you would read off the names of the commissioners from our Redistricting Advisory Commission. There are a few of them on attending as attendees, but it would be nice to get all their names out in the public after we hear what they've come up with.
All right, will do.
May I start now?
Please.
Yes.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. And it was a great pleasure to work with your staff and your commissioners. We have been helping your district with trustee area, or rather election district boundaries, for a long time. Next slide, Robin. Back in 1990, our company started helping Monterey County jurisdictions move to single member district elections and then to redistrict. We helped your jurisdiction move from at-large to by-district elections in 1991. In 2011, back up, yeah, in 2011, we checked those 1991 boundaries against the census 2000 census counts and made some adjustments. But then in 2011, after the census 2010 counts, we did not need to adjust them because the populations were still balanced or equal enough. And I'll elaborate upon that shortly. I apologize if some of you have heard this many times before, but in case there are people at this meeting that are not really familiar with redistricting, it's a good idea just to go through the ground rules and the criteria, we think. So we've been helping jurisdictions in Monterey County and elsewhere redistrict after the 2020 census. And so here we go, Robin, next. What is redistricting? I'll talk about that briefly and why do it, and where are your current election district boundaries? What are the legal requirements that we must follow during redistricting? And what are communities of interest and why are they important? And finally, Robin will talk about the recommended plan, which was called Plan 4. Robin, next. After each census, US Census, all the jurisdictions that elect board members by area or representatives by separate area must redistrict. That's from the Congress on down to the states need to redistrict, the congressional districts and the state assembly and legislative districts and Senate districts and cities and counties and special districts like yours, as well as school districts. Because it's a constitutional requirement that populations of each of these subdivisions be equal or almost equal. There are laws that we follow, and the deadline for your adopting new election district boundaries is next month on April 17th. These new boundaries will be used, whatever boundaries you adopt will be used until after Census 2030. And unless there's another pandemic, those data will probably be available early 2031. And you'll need to have the boundaries, which you adopt now or next month, checked to see if the populations are unequal, and if so, how to adjust the districts, director division districts. No matter what, current directors will complete their terms of office even if they no longer live in the area they were elected to represent. Next, please. Here are the current election districts. Notice that they are not of equal size. This is because they have to be equal in population, not in square miles. And Division 5 is especially large because the area to the east of the coast and then down into the southern areas of your watershed are sparsely populated. So that's why that district is so very large. And the other director divisions, 1, 2, 3, 4, are much smaller because populations are denser. Next, please. Here are some detail maps. The one on the left shows the cities and unincorporated communities that are part of your jurisdiction. And on the right, we see the current director division boundaries with the cities. And here we have Monterey in an orange color, Sand City in a brown, and Seaside in a light tan, and Delray Oaks yellow. The city of Monterey has some interesting boundaries with unincorporated areas within the city limits or nearly within the city limits. Next, please. Now, the number one law that we must follow is derived from the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution. That is, populations need to be equal representation. That means that every human being needs to be represented equally, not some human beings having more say as to who will represent them than others. So even little babies are part of the population that needs to be equal. Also, non-citizens need to be equal, and the Supreme Court made a decision on that just a few years ago. The Federal Voting Rights Act and the State Voting Rights Act also affect what we do. We also consider changes that are made by the courts, interpretations of the law. We know we don't do racial gerrymandering. I'll explain what that is shortly. And we follow the state elections code. The elections code comes first. I'm sorry, what did you miss? I turned my mute on by accident. I guess I don't need to ask you. You can follow this. Census 2020 counted 105,911 people within your boundaries, and each of the director divisions needs to have 1/5 of that, or as close to 21,182 people as is reasonable. The difference between the actual 2020 population of an election district and the ideal 21,182 is called the planned deviation, and that planned deviation may not exceed 10%. That means the difference between the most populous and least populous director divisions, the spread from small to large, cannot exceed 2,118 people. So next slide. We did that analysis and found out that your director divisions are not balanced in using 2020 counts, which isn't surprising since the last time your boundaries were adjusted was 20 years ago. You can see that the most populous division is number 3 with nearly 23,000 people, and the least populous is just under 20,000 people. That's division 4. And the difference between most and least populous divisions is 2,973. That's bottom center on the table. And this is 14%, the total deviation. The spread is between division 3 with a positive 8.2% to a negative 5.8% for division 4. So that's the spread that if you add them, those numbers, the distance between number of percentage points between most and least populous divisions and their deviations is 14%. So that's more than 10%. That's why the boundaries needed to be adjusted. Next, please. Now, the Federal Voting Rights Act, which we've been adhering to since we first helped you draw director divisions 30 years ago, is it? After 1990 census, prohibits packing and cracking. So packing is when you put most of the protected group or minority group members in a single election district, and cracking is when you split the concentrations of protected groups between election districts, as you see in the bottom diagram. The ideal distribution looks like the next slide. So ideally, you would have a map that did something like this, and this is really abstract, so of course you wouldn't have those concentrations, but you want to give the members of groups protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act, these are what so-called minority groups, need to be kept intact, and they're kind of community of interest, which I'll mention in a moment. Next, please. Now, racial gerrymandering to create an election district that is minority majority, or to have an election district that's non-minority majority, that was outlawed back in 1993 in the U.S. Supreme Court's decision, Shaw v. Reno. This is a very famous map because of the very odd shapes of those two election districts. These congressional districts were designed to keep blacks in a district and whites in a district, respectively, I think. And in some places, the populations are connected only by the center line of a road or freeway. So that's why this was declared unconstitutional. Next, please. Here are the race ethnic distributions that we find in Census 2020 inside your jurisdiction's boundaries. If you had the opportunity or will have the opportunity to zoom in on any of these dots, you can see some of them look like they're all royal blue and some of them look like they're a mix of colors. These are actually pie charts, one per census block. And the diameter of the census block of the pie indicates the total population of that block. So, for example, in the left-hand map, you see Carmel Valley Village down in the lower right corner. And you see green as a predominant color in those census blocks. And the green represents non-Hispanic whites. Whereas in Seaside, can you show us Seaside, Robin, with your cursor? Well, anyway, you know where Seaside is. It's just to the left of the number one. Yeah. You can see that all those pies that look like they're all royal blue, and that's Hispanic or Latinx. These maps were something that the commission looked at as they deliberated and took into account these distributions as well as many other things during their deliberations. Next, please. The election code says that these four criteria may be taken into account when redistricting, and no order of priority is given. Topography, geography, cohesiveness, contiguity, integrity, and compactness of territory, and communities of interest. And this last one, this communities of interest, needs amplification because that's a very important thing in this round of redistricting because of a new law called the California Fair Maps Act. Next slide, Robin. Communities of interest are areas that are contiguous. That means they're concentrated geographically, where people share common social and economic interests or common needs, and should be in a single director division or be considered when drawing the boundaries. Recognized neighborhoods, and the city of Monterey does have official neighborhoods, and your commissioners did consider maps they saw maps that with these neighborhoods, Monterey neighborhoods on them, in order to try to avoid dividing these communities, and areas with similar living standards, including income, education. And another characteristic that's a community of interest, especially if the people see themselves as being a community of sorts with common interests, could be African Americans and Latinx people, or members of any other group that could be geographically concentrated. Next, please. Now, Robin is going to tell you the recommendation of your commission. Robin, take it away.
Thank you, Jean. Good evening, everyone. This second half of our presentation, we'll do a little review of the process, and then we'll go right into describing the recommended plan. The Redistricting Advisory Committee, or the RAC, met 3 times. Each time they met, they discussed plans and provided feedback to us as the demographers. At the March 17th RAC meeting, commissioners decided unanimously on a plan to recommend to the board. And the recommended plan was developed by commissioners with our assistance in some live mapping using the GIS software. There were many criteria considered by the commissioners. The first being empowering the Latinx population to elect representatives of choice. They also considered the distribution of Seaside's Latinx and African American populations. One of the commissioners provided renter populations, and we were able to map that. Household economic status was of interest, and we were able to provide a map showing the median household income by census tract. City limits were used as much as possible for election district boundaries. The Seaside Business District was identified and shown on a map so that we could try and keep that, or they could try and keep that together as much as possible in a district, as well as Jean mentioned just now, the Monterey neighborhoods. And your commissioners are very engaged in their communities, and they're knowledgeable about about your Monterey neighborhoods. And I gave excellent feedback on neighborhoods as a community of interest, and those were used when drawing the new recommended plan election districts. And the last item, their current directors are kept in separate election districts in the recommended plan. Some key elements of the recommended plan. The focus was to carve out a district that kept a large portion of the Latinx population together as much as possible, that also includes Seaside's African American population concentration. The district is very different from the current one, which divides the Latinx population, because that plan was created 20 years ago, and there wasn't as much of a Latinx concentration 20 years ago. And we have some maps to help visualize that change. There were 3 other relatively minor changes made from the current plan in the recommended plan in order to balance the population. And the commission carefully considered which populations to move. They tried various scenarios and looked at how that would affect each district, and they looked at the numbers and the Latinx and African American populations, and how each of those changes would affect that. District 3 needed to lose population, so the area east of El Estero Park was moved to District 2. Then after gaining population from District 3, District 2 needed to lose population. So an unincorporated rural area east of Monterey was moved to District 5. Then District 4 needed more population, and an unincorporated area north of Carmel by the Sea was moved from District 5 to District 4 using city limits as the boundary. So that's a very nice boundary there. So city limits were used as much as possible when creating the recommended plan election district boundaries. These two maps show the recommended plan with the cities and unincorporated communities color shaded in the background. The map on the left is an overview map. It shows the entire jurisdiction. Plan 4, the recommended plan, is shown with a black line, and the blue line is your official outer boundary. And the reason why there are some differences in the outer boundary is that we must use census blocks when redistricting and creating plans. And the census geography is not precinct based, so which creates some differences between the two boundaries. But if there were populations in those differences, they were accounted for and adjusted in the counts. So the map on the right is just a zoomed in version of the map on the left. Again, Plan 4 is shown with the black line with the color shaded cities in the background. And this is to hopefully give you a little bit better view or detailed view of Plan 4, where District 1 takes in the Latinx and African American concentrations. It follows the Sand City city limit, and then it goes along Military Avenue, and then follows General Jim Moore Boulevard and across Hilby Avenue, and then follows the Seaside city limit out to the outer boundary. The District 2-3 boundary follows Camino Aguajito and then follows Aguajito Road, then along Monholland Road to a bit of Olmsted Road, and then follows South Boundary Road out to the outer boundary. District 4 includes all of Pacific Grove, all of Del Monte Forest, and then uses the Carmel by the Sea northern boundary, and then follows Highway 1 to District 3. And then District 5 gets everything else. So this plan, like I mentioned in the slide before, follows as the city limit boundaries as much as possible. Thanks to the commission for that, because our initial plan didn't do that. Our next map here shows your current districts color shaded with the recommended plan using a black line. And the purpose of this map is to show you which areas changed with the recommended plan from your current plan. So the biggest change here is in districts 1 and 2. You can see that they're very different. Your current district 1 is this teal area, and the current district 2 is the purple area. So again, District 1 was the focus of that was to keep the Latinx and African American communities together as much as possible. And that's the big change right here. Then District 3 needed to lose population. So this pink area right here that is currently in District 3 was moved to District 2. Then District 2 needed to lose some population. And this purple area right here that is currently in 5, that is currently in 2, I'm getting my colors mixed up here. Currently in 2 was moved from District 2 to District 5. And then the small little area right here, the third area that was moved from the current plan, was in District 5, and it was moved to District 4. And this is the one that follows the Carmel by the Sea northern boundary here, and then follows Highway 1 up here. And I apologize, I've been using my cursor on the wrong screen, so I thought I was pointing out these areas and you couldn't see my cursor, so I apologize for that. I'll try and remember to use the right screen. We have a couple of maps that show the concentrations of the Latinx and African American communities. And these maps were instrumental in helping visualize where the concentrations were so that the commission could draw the District 1-2 boundaries. And there were several different variations of this boundary until they came to an agreement on Plan 4. On the left is the concentrations of the Latinx populations. The lighter purple shaded areas have the lesser populations of Latinx, and the darker shaded areas, census blocks, show the higher concentrations of Latinx population. And then on the right, the map on the right here is the same idea, but shows the African American concentrations in the orange and darker orange areas. This slide shows the data table for Plan 4. It shows that the plan deviation is 7.7%, which is underneath the required 10%. There are 5 different measures of populations that are included in the data table, and you can take a look at that in detail later, if you wish. And our summary slide of the recommended plan. The commission members collaborated to develop a very creative plan, Plan 4. It was exciting to see how the plan evolved based on the commission's concerns, their ideas, and their knowledge. The plan features a strong Latinx African American district in Seaside, which is District 1. It uses city limits for many of the election district boundaries. And the plan takes into account economic communities of interest, the renter population, the race ethnic distribution, and cities and neighborhoods as communities of interest. And the recommended plan also keeps each current director in their own district. And that concludes our portion of the presentation, and now we're happy to take questions or listen to your discussions.
Yeah, with that, I want to recognize that we've got several of the commissioners on this call as attendees. I count at least 5 of them. Very much appreciate their work and their continued interest in the outcome of their work. Joelle, do you have the complete roster of the commission?
Yes, I do.
Can you just go down the list and let everyone know who did this work?
The Division 1 Commissioner was Susan Schiavone. Division 2, Esther Malkin. Division 3, Nancy Southridge. Division 4, Tama Over. Division 5, Mylene Fisher. The County Representative, Troy Ishikawa. City Representative, Stephen Lilly. We had also 2 at-large members, Mark Eisenhart and Monica Lau.
Thank you. And with that, we would like to hear any director discussion or public comment. We will not be acting on this tonight. We will have a special meeting on April 1st, so I noticed this group has convened on Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, and then now our board gets to convene on April Fool's Day to act on.
Before we go to questions and comments, I would just like to say, having observed the 3 meetings, that this group of the commission, they are essentially volunteers. And I just want to thank them for their contribution. I thought that the work they did was fantastic, that they were so thoughtful, so knowledgeable, with the help of our very, very skilled consultants, but and Dave Stoll and Joelle. It really was a collective effort. All these people were very much needed, but and what Joelle had to shoulder was really a lot of very complicated work, and he did it extraordinarily well. But I especially want to thank the people who volunteered to be to serve on this advisory commission. And I agree with the consultants that they were creative and thoughtful, and I'm very excited about their proposal. So with that, can we see if directors have questions or comments?
I second Karen's observation, and I do appreciate the commissioner's involvement, especially in holidays or semi-official holidays. So that is great work, and it shows great citizen involvement. Thank you.
Supervisor Adams?
Thank you. Yes, I too just want to express my thanks to all of the volunteers that came forward to do this work. And I have a feeling that it was really pretty fascinating. Just, you know, if you are interested in where people live and how people kind of view all of this. And I was just wondering if at any time during the sort of community portion of this, if people were understanding and enthusiastic about the way that the districts were being, you know, sort of carved a little bit. I would think it would not always be easy to explain all of the rationale, but I was just wondering what the personal experience was, if anybody would be willing to comment on that.
Are you asking the commissioners?
If they are they able to speak?
Several of them are attendees currently. We can ask them to, or I guess we can move them over, can't we?
Yeah, we've got two that have raised their hand already, so.
Oh, good.
Good. Let's
Three, all right. Yay.
all right, let's call on them now.
All right. Would you like me to just move them over as panelists all at once, or one at a time?
Anyone who has a hand, any of them who have a hand raised or who would like to speak, yes. Why don't we have them all? Yeah, bring them all over, and then they can decide as we go along if they have something to say.
Okay.
And while Joelle is doing that, I'd just like to say that what this means is, I'm sure you understand from the presentation, is that we will have one district that's majority minority, so-called minority. It will actually be between the Latinx population and the African American population. It'll be they will together be a majority of the population in the new District 1 if we adopt this proposal. And I find that very exciting. Hopefully that will be empowering to the residents.
So Director Anderson has a comment, and then we'll go to the
Yeah.
commissioners.
Yeah, just quickly, I agree. I was also really impressed with the care with which they looked at what the options were and moved things around to make sure and have considered what groups needed to stay together would be best served that way. And also, something I said to Dave the other day, I was absolutely blown away by the software that allowed you to see where are the renters and where are the groups of interest in the neighborhoods. It's just fascinating. And I think any public that was watching it, watching these proceedings, would have seen exactly where the data came from and felt very confident in it. You know, the voters just all the things that were considered. It was so clear that it gave you a lot of faith in the results. I was very impressed.
Great. So let's go first to Commissioner Mark Eisenhart.
Thank you, Dave. First of all, I think Director Adams, in order to answer your question, my experience was that this was a group of people who were incredibly collaborative by nature. It was remarkable. And then when you combine that with these incredible demographers, and it was, as Director Anderson observed, there wasn't just the technology, but they had the ability to gently make suggestions and then gently move to the side when creative ideas were coming forward, and to give very healthy, safe space for all of that. I mean, it was really remarkable. It was organic, collaborative, of course, respectful. And the room, if you will, the virtual room, and I'll end it here, was filled with extremely knowledgeable people about their community. It was remarkable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Second in line was Commissioner Esther Malkin.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I echo what was just said, and it was a really good experience, very educational for all of us, I think. My points that I brought into this is I wanted to make sure that the renter community was represented and thought of in the process, as the majority of the residents of a lot of the cities that we were working on. And I think that we did come up with a good plan, and it was a very positive experience all around for, I think, all of us. So I am going to encourage others to try and participate in those things if they can, because it's important for people to understand why the policies and processes are taking place and how they can be a part of it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Great.
I'm hearing an echo when Mark Eisenhart and Esther Malkin were speaking. I heard an echo. Are others hearing that as well?
I am.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, there's a little time delay between when it goes from one person's machine to the other. And so we've got a little bit of a echo. Yep. Thank you, Mario. So the third commissioner who had a hand up was Susan Schiavone.
Hi, thank you. You asked about emotional responses, and when District 1 first appeared on the map, and I thought, wow, they've really changed District 1 radically. I was a little taken aback, but after learning more about what the procedure was, and I learned a lot about what should happen when you're mapping for districts, and I enjoyed it a lot. I think we all worked together really well. I think we were bringing what we did know to the table as locals, and I think it worked out quite well, and I hope it works out for the district to see it that way. I enjoyed it, and I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed working with everybody, and I loved the live mapping tool. It was really, really exciting. Thank you for letting us do this. It was a great volunteer opportunity.
And we've got three other commissioners on who did not raise their hands. So, maybe a last chance here. Commissioners Troy Ishikawa, Monica Lal, and Marlene Fisher. Did you guys want to add anything to the comments?
Marlene?
Marlene Fisher.
I was muted. I just want to echo what other people have said. I think we all had a similar experience, and I enjoyed working with everyone. And I thought that when I got into this thing, what am I going to do here? I'm not sure what I can contribute. And as a member of District 5,
I didn't have a lot to say about District 5, but I could certainly support the ideas that other people came up relative, especially to Districts 1 and 2, which needed the biggest work. Of course, 3 a little too. It was a good experience, and the demographers were amazing. Really enjoyed their input and their tools and the way they helped us through the process. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Marlene.
That's all the hands that we see. Once again, our thanks to the commissioners. What I'm hearing is there were not a whole lot of questions coming back from the board, but as you digest some of this, if you have questions, certainly we can play with data one last go around. But this is the recommendation of your independent commission at this point, and that's what we'll be taking up at the special meeting, unless there's some major flaw that gets identified by you or others between now and then.
Well, yes,
Through the chair, if I may,
please.
Division 2, that got all of Fort Ord in it. And that's good. Now we're going to have a discussion with Marina Coastal about that sooner or later. But will those people out there on Fort Ord still receive a ballot from the district for that area?
Yes, and Robin, I don't know if you're still available, but if either you or Joel could pull up the screen. I had wanted to show a slide that there will be a cascading effect that if we move forward with Measure J, and if we negotiate a sphere of influence truce with Marina Coast Water District where we overlap, then that would make the district's northern boundary at approximately Military Avenue and Seaside, or just below Cove Avenue. And so you do have a population in what is the new District 2 that stretches all the way up and around the city of Seaside to Seaside Highlands in that area. And what would happen at that point is, as you cede that territory, every district going south and going east will get affected. Okay, so here you see, these are the old district boundaries, right?
Yeah, that's the old one.
So if you can just jump forward to Plan 4.
Sure. Yeah, just tell me when to stop. There's several different
Yep, there's
maps showing. We're almost there.
Yeah, there we go. That's good.
Okay.
So on the right-hand side, where you see Division 1, its northern boundary is approximately, or is in fact, Military Avenue. And in late 2019, might have been early 2020, Marina Coast Water District formally annexed properties up to that line. And so if we split the services to stay out of their sphere of influence, for a variety of reasons, that would put the district's northern boundary basically at the current northern boundary of Division 1. So still go north a little bit to pick up all of Sand City, but then it would drop down, be that flat line straight across to where the blue line picks up again. Now, what's interesting is right now where the number 2 is, and that light gray area of Seaside and the remainder, this is almost 100% open space and deeded open space to the Bureau of Land Management. So there's not a whole lot of affected population there. But above the word Seaside, you do have the Fitch Park neighborhood, you've got Seaside Highlands, you've got some military housing. They will be affected, and they currently don't receive many services from the district. Their water is provided by Marina Coast Water District. So on a population basis, to reshuffle the deck, so to speak, one would probably look for a little bit of population that it has to give up, but then pretty much all of them would be just reduced in size a little bit. And so we would go through the same kind of boundary adjustment. And so this is something that we are going to ask the demographers. We're going to do a separate scope of service when they're redistricting for the census for election purposes is all wrapped up and they've got a gap in their schedule here in the next 6 months to a year. We will be asking them to give us a scope of services for that purpose while the data is still fresh and this exercise is still fresh. But it'll be purely a what if. It won't be anything that we're bound to. It's nothing we have to do now. But you give up that northern seaside population, you have to rebalance all the others. So look for that plan 5, hypothetical, at some point within, let's say, a year, but that'll just sit on a shelf until this board decides to do something with it. There's pluses and minuses about ceding territory. Right now, we're the resource manager for the entire seaside groundwater basin, and we may not want to cede our oversight capability. We've got certain carve-outs from the Superior Court in the adjudication that gives us rights over the seaside basin. And so it may be one of those things where we want our jurisdiction to include the resource, even though some of the people aren't being served. And so these will be discussions to be had in the future. But as of right now, that big Division 2 doesn't contain as much population as you would think. It's a little bit like Division 5, a lot of open space, a lot of watershed in 5 and a lot of Fort Ord National Monument in 2.
Director Riley has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, for that explanation. That was going to be one of my questions about how do you explain the kind of the wraparound image that's created here. I understand that whatever is going to happen with Marina Coast and that population north of Seaside is a project in process, and I know it'll get resolved here in the next couple of years. So I know we're going to have to deal with that, and I'm expecting that. I just wanted my comments I want to make about the redistricting committee. First of all, I really appreciate what they were emphasizing, that try to keep any line, any district line. Don't create 3 districts for a single city. Try to hold it to 2 as best you can. And that prevailed in this final project. And I just want to compliment that.
Well, did and it didn't. We had a great deal of discussion about the trifurcation versus bifurcation and what to do about La Mesa housing for the primarily Naval Postgraduate School students. And I think La Mesa ended up in Division 5. Maybe not. No.
It's in 3.
It's in 3. Yeah, okay.
In the recommended plan.
So we
Right.
succeeded on both fronts then. You're right, Director Riley. We did manage to just keep it to 2, similar to what Seaside ended up with.
Yeah, so I appreciate that effort by the commission and the success. Also, I want to compliment the demographers and Amy's comment about the software. I was amazed at that last meeting, the 3rd meeting, where they were looking at small neighborhoods and the software talent could isolate the neighborhood, throw it into a district or a different district or whatever, come up with the data instantaneously, it seems to me. I mean, I'm not a techie, so I'm impressed. I was watching fantasy TV as far as I was concerned, because it happened so quick and so fast and right within the conversation status of what the questions were. I just so appreciate that. Anyway, and I also appreciate the commissioners because they really knew their neighborhoods. They commented specifically about individual neighborhoods, individual streets. I was just very impressed. I only watched 2 of the 3, but I watched the second one and the third one where I think the rubber hit the road for that whole commission. And I was very impressed, and I thank all of them very much for what they contributed.
Yeah, and I'll give a little bit of advice to Robin. Keep the mystery. Even if you think it's easy for you, others think it's really complex, so don't tell them.
I'll take your advice, Dave. Thank you.
Me.
And through the chair, just one more thanks from me to all the commissioners, to the demographers. They did an outstanding job. I listened to all 3 meetings, and I couldn't wait for this one to come because Division 1 became what I expected to become. So, and it worked out well. So the future is on its way. So we at least got one of them done. So I appreciate all the help that everybody done. And I just hope that everybody get to vote the right way when it time comes. So thank you.
I'd like to say some follow-up on that, on your comment, Director Edwards, speaking of the future next. One thing I noticed looking at the data that was considered is about voter turnout. Even though, part of the purpose of the effort was to equalize population, which the plan does, if you looked at the data on actual voters was provided, that is, people who are eligible to register to vote, registered voters and actual voters. And I realized that the number of actual voters from 2 divisions, the 2 more affluent divisions, 4 and 5, was about equal to the actual number of actual voters in the other 3 divisions. So the voter turnout is much lower in divisions 1, 2, and 3 than in 4 and 5. So that tells me that we have our work to do to reach the public better, to tell them what the district is and what it does, and reasons why they should vote when the time comes. It's very interesting data, and I agree with that, being able to see the data visually and look at different possibilities in real time. It was just amazing to have that technical ability to facilitate the work. It was great. Other comments? So Dave Stoltz, our next step is to consider adopting this proposal on April 1st?
Correct. Yeah, we would normally have done it at the regular board meeting, but the regular board meeting is a couple days too late for the statutory requirement.
Okay. Well, I just want to say one more time that we also owe a real debt of gratitude to Joelle, because I don't know if people realize how much work was involved. It's very complicated, and you did a lot of research and information gathering and coordinating. I really think it was a quite a demanding project, and I just want to thank you again.
Thank you, Chair Paul. And at this time, would you like to take public comment for item number 4?
This would be a good time, wouldn't it? Let's do that.
So if you would like to make public comment on item number 4, please raise your hand. And Chair Paul, I do not see any member of the public with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
Maybe go first.
I take that back. Sarah, could you share the timer?
Who do we have? Let's see.
Of Michael Bear.
Michael Bear.
Go.
Michael, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I want to thank the commissioners, the volunteers for their work. It's very exciting to hear that it was collaboration and the synthesis of everybody working for a common goal and being very satisfied with the result. And that's exciting to see. And I just commend every one of those commissioners who brought that energy to make this happen. And then I just want to thank the board as well for just your thoughtful comments and the integrity that you do your work. It's inspiring to see a board and a work like this in the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Sarah, you can stop the screen share. Chair Pa, I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you. And many, many thanks again to our demographers, and we will return to the subject on April 1st. And with that, we can move on to our general manager's report.
Thank you. I'm going to try to be brief because we've got a lot of business to do. This is a compliance report monthly that we see. This is the two major components of the Monterey Peninsula Water Resource System, the Carmel River and the Seaside Groundwater Basin. The important takeaway from this is we are outperforming the forecast by actual being about 675 acre feet below target for the 5 months ending at the end of February. And even on the coastal sub area, while we're negative, this is actually about 20 acre feet less negative than it was a month ago. So making progress in that area as well. But at the end of the day, this difference in black numbers of 572 is a positive for where we are headed. With respect to some of the other component elements, what you see here is pure water Monterey recovery has been increasing. We added another 418 acre feet during the last month of recovery. And that's to be expected. As you can see, these numbers over 5 months, you could pretty readily see how we'll get to 3,500 acre feet for a year, because we're at 5 months and just a little bit over 3,000 acre feet of total target. Table 13, the 68 acre feet has not changed. That's dependent on rain, where there's extra water in the river. And of course, we haven't had any real rain since early February, late January, I think, and it wasn't that significant.
Yeah.
And then demand, customer demand. I can tell you that we were about 180 acre feet better than last year at the end of last month. Now we're only 106 acre feet, and that's evidence of the dry February that we had. If it had been wetter, then you think we'd keep that distance. But the fact of the matter is, customer demand is still below last year's through these 5 months. Legally available supply is, the river has about 28,000 acre feet in storage, but the legal limit of withdrawals is, heading into that 3,376 range for the calendar year. So there's going to be more water in the system than can be legally addressed. And so that'll be shifting our focus more towards if the water is there, can we get it out? Is it legally available? And those will be some of the things controlling where we're headed if it remains another dry year. This is rainfall. Again, total year to date, about 9.96, just under 10 inches. That's 65% of the long-term average. And you can see just a little bit, about 0.4 of an inch happened in February. This is the cumulative red line. So you can see even up through that little bit of rain we had over the weekend, however little it was, less than 1/10 of an inch, We've now pushed up over 10 inches total for the water year, which is about where we ended up last year total. So if we get 1 or 2 rainfalls, we'll at least be better off than we were last year. This is unimpaired stream flow. It's about 51% of long-term average. And I already mentioned storage is just under 29,000 acre feet, but it's only accessible up to about 3,500 acre feet. That concludes the compliance. The major takeaway is CalAm is fully compliant with both the cease and desist order and the Seaside Basin adjudication. I want to shift attention to item 6, which is an update on water supply projects. Try to be brief here. Pure Water Monterey, the base project, has delivered over 6,100 acre feet so far. We're in our second full year of operation, so that's a great number. It's over 2 billion gallons that have been delivered. We've got some commissioning going on with Deep Injection Well 3 and Deep Injection Well 4. Those came online with step testing, we call it, about 2 weeks ago. And we're in the full commissioning mode right now. So those will become usable wells here shortly for injection. With respect to the expansion, the 90% design documents for the expansion were submitted March 4th. And then the schedule still has potential starting in September of 2022. That's likely to slip with the Public Utilities Commission schedule on the water purchase agreement, which I'll talk about shortly. But if we were able to start construction in 2022, there would be substantial completion at the end of calendar year 2023. It's about a 19 to 20 month complete construction cycle from when the water purchase agreement is approved. And we continue to work with the city of Seaside on the easements for all of the different injection field facilities. So that's going pretty well. With respect to the water purchase agreement in front of the Public Utilities Commission, all of the intervener testimony was due on the 11th and were submitted. The next step is on April 1st. Intervener supplemental testimony will be due, and then there will be a meet and confer in the on or about April 11th with a case management statement the second week of April. So, best case, according to the commission, is a proposed decision within 90 days of the reply briefs, and the reply briefs will be due May 20th if there are no hearings, and June 20th if there are hearings. So you're basically 3 months best case from the third week of May, and so that's going to be best case August. That's where we're thinking maybe in September we'll know where we're at. But if hearings are required, we're going to lose a little bit of slippage, at least a month. And that concludes the update. And we can move on to the other items. Try to get to that lengthy action items public hearings list. Yeah, Director Riley.
I just have a question, Dave, about the letter that's in the supplemental package from Marina Coast Water District about CalAm's proposed well locations. Can you give us an update on that status or that issue?
Yeah, so at my level, the 3 public agencies are having a discussion on that this Wednesday. I can tell you our review is that the district has a more favored nation status over the Seaside groundwater basin that was upheld by the Superior Court when they adjudicated the basin. So we have certain rights of storage as the district. And the district law is very clear that we can delegate to third parties for our resource management and so forth. So there's going to be discussion about whose ordinance has meaning in this situation. The Marina Coast situation is they just annexed this area. They have an ordinance in place that says no wells can be dug unless they're district wells, except for a few exceptions. What's interesting here is this overlies the Seaside Groundwater Basin. So the district, their district, Marina Coast Water District, has no rights to drill wells on their own in that area, but producers do under the adjudication. And so our rights were protected. Cal-Am's rights to enter into a storage and recovery agreement were protected by the court's ruling. So there's some dueling interpretations of law and code that are going to have to get sorted out here. But we're hopeful that that there's no technical interference with this comes back really to the Campus Town project that the city of Seaside wants. It's along that strip or that southern edge of CSUMB. And we've been told by Marina Coast Water District they're very concerned about the impact on that project. We haven't been able to put our finger on physical impact. We're not sure what this really means, but we're trying to get the answers. We're meeting on it.
Thank you. Keep us informed.
Hey, Madam Chair, I think we can move on.
Madam Chair, you're on mute. You're muted.
Thank you very much, Dave Stolt. And now we're going to hear from General Counsel.
Thank you and good evening, Madam Chair and members of the public and all the board members. I'm reporting on closed sessions at two different meetings. We did have a closed session in the Thursday, February 24th meeting. We considered 4 items. 2 items were conferences with labor negotiators, one concerning your unrepresented employee, your general manager. The other was your unrepresented employee, district counsel, myself. And as to both of those items, general direction was provided, but no specific reportable action was taken. Those 2 items now are on your open session agenda for tonight. Also on February 24th, there were 2 conferences concerning pending litigation or potential litigation. The first was the board providing direction on a potential lawsuit against the LAFCO concerning LAFCO's denial of the district's application to exercise its latent powers. The board was provided background, did provide general direction, but no specific reportable action was taken. And then the second item of litigation was the status of the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association lawsuit against the district. That's the Taxpayers Association's challenge against the district's practices to implement ordinance number 152. The contention is that the district was inappropriately collecting both a water supply charge and a user fee. Shortly before that, the district had brought a demur to the petition, and that had been heard by Judge Panetta. And Judge Panetta did not grant the demur upon request, and the board did review that circumstance. The board did authorize the district to pursue a challenge to the hearing on the demur. There was a vote of 6-0 with 1 member absent. That was Major Roberson. He was unable to attend. And that did authorize the filing of a writ of review challenging the February 18th ruling on the demur. And that petition has in fact been filed with the 6th District Court of Appeal on Friday, March 18th. With respect to the closed session that was held earlier this evening at 5:30, that was the topic was 1 item, and that's pending litigation involving the district. The title of the case is Gensco doing business as JM Electric versus Mercer Fraser Company, and also naming the Water Management District as a defendant. This is a disbursement dispute concerning monies that were contracted for the completed Sleepy Hollow facility upgrade project. there were disputes back and forth between the electrical subcontractor, JM Electric, suing the general contractor, Mercer Fraser, and naming the district as well, because we were the beneficiary of the project. There are disputes as to the release of retention funds. That project has been completed and it's been in the process of, funds are being in the process of being dispersed. The board did provide general direction to staff and council in terms of a negotiating position that we can bring to the table to try to settle this lawsuit. But there was no specific reportable action that was taken. That concludes my report on all of those matters. Thank you.
Thank you. We need to see if there are any members of the public that wish to say anything about this report.
Sarah, if you could share the timer. Michael, when you're ready, you may present your comment.
Yeah, good evening. I was thinking of if I would comment. So I think you need to sue LAFCO, and I don't know why you would wait. Like everything's kind of played out on, appeals and all that. So, and really to honor all the hard work that they've still put into, that mammoth effort. And also a highlight from you and Karen Paul's appeal to LAFCO at their last meeting. Like, a judge needs to see that. I just think, like, why not just get it started? I don't, so, yeah, I don't see anything that's going to change until you start to do it. So what are we waiting for? I yield my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Sarah, you could stop the screen share. Chair Paul. I do not see anybody else with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from directors on the district council's report? Okay, thank you. Let us move on to our action items. Item 10, actually.
Karen?
Yes,
We
Director.
have to go to the public hearing.
How about oral reports? Item number 8.
Yep.
I'm ready with one.
I am sorry. Yes, Director Anderson.
I am the board representative to ACWA, the American, oh boy. That's embarrassing.
It's the Association of California Water Agencies.
California Water Agencies. Thank you, Dave. And I went to their legislative session, which was February 18th. It was about a 3-hour or so meeting. They had three different sessions. And what I'd like to do now is just report on the first session and leave the second session. The second session was the state budget funding for infrastructure, drought, and healthy forests. I'd like to leave that one for a future meeting. But tonight, I just want to talk about the first one. The subject was drought and resilience, California way of life. There was an assembly member from Southern California, a senator from Southern California, and our own John Laird that were the speakers. The focus was, what is the legislature doing to implement former Governor Brown's vision to make conservation a California way of life? And they discussed the effect of this historic drought on everything: housing, transportation, and sustainability. The common opinion was that a real big effort should be invested in efficiency. And as Laird put it, again, conservation as a way of life. And they suggested that we transition from the word conservation to water efficiency. The point was made by Robert Hertzberg, who's from Southern California, to gain credibility with the public for dealing with water, that this is really something that's very important. We have to gain their trust, and the entire state needs to do this together. We need the public to understand all, how critical this is, and all the matters that are that need our attention. The urban water use objective, which was Senate Bill, I think it was 1157, I may have gotten that wrong, was set in 2009 at 55 gallons per person per day, GPD. But there are step downs planned. For 2025, it's planned to reduce that to 47 GPD, and in 2030 to 42 GPD. So those are significant. And they talked about the obvious complexity of the fact that we as districts are in the business of selling water. But with this plan to decrease water use, we still have to figure out how do we pay for our employees and plant maintenance and everything else. So that was brought up, but it wasn't spoken to, with any kind of, they didn't elaborate on that. They just acknowledged that. So Laird made the point right near the end that we have to educate the public because we're asking them to be more efficient, and we're telling them that they're going to pay more for less. So this really should be the focus of our outreach. The outreach chair of Aqua, Crystal, boy, it's a complicated name, Tufenchian. I'm sure that's not right, but it looks what it's like. That there is an outreach handbook available online. And let's see, it's available on water.ca.gov/programs. There was a model water efficiency landscape ordinance passed in 1990, AB 325. And the Department of Water Resources is in charge of developing the ordinance, and it was updated in 2015 by executive order. And that ordinance of efficiency, water efficiency, landscape ordinance is available online. So that's pretty much the distillation of that one session, and I will talk about the funding session at a later time.
Thank you, Director Anderson. And before we move on to possible reports from other directors, I just like to add a couple of quick comments to the information you just gave, because I attended the legislative symposium as well, and I just wanted to highlight what stuck with me as the most important themes: climate change, that the future is not going to be like the past, that even all the past, we can't plan for the future based on what we've experienced in the past because of climate change. And that adapting and managing our water resources going forward is just going to be, obviously extremely challenging, and it's going to require what they called an all of the above approach. So a portfolio of different resources, using research, science, technology to figure out what are the best ones in terms of the environment and cost. And that cost is also going to be extremely important in prioritizing, because it all has to be paid for. In terms of paying for, they emphasize that, it's many jurisdictions, the cost of the investments needed cannot possibly be supported by the ratepayers alone. And John Laird gave the example of Santa Cruz, where he said they need $50 million of investment, and there isn't a ratepayer base big enough to support that. So there's quite a bit discussion, a lot of discussion about funding. And I guess besides climate change, the funding challenges, Laird said we have to, and other presenters, we have to think of the water resource planning as a statewide issue. So it really reminded me of the discussion that Supervisor Adams has begun at the county level of that, you can't just think of who benefits, who pays in sort of little small interest groups all pitted against each other. It's got a problem we all have to solve together. I mean, they were talking at the statewide level, but same point as at the county level, the discussion that you've initiated at the county level. And there is money in some of there is a potential for state funding for some of these projects.
I'll
And I
be
guess,
specifically talking about that my
Yeah.
next presentation.
okay, good. And then, just a real emphasis, especially by Senator Laird, on what he called bringing the public along and the need for leadership, political leadership. By that, he was, I think, referring to the state legislature, maybe the executive branch too, and agencies like ours in, making good decisions about water resources, but also explaining to the public when things change, the efficiency, water efficiency measures, and why they're needed and how we change, the change that is needed and the reasons for it. So I'll stop there. Do directors have reports of other meetings or conferences? Director Edwards?
Yes, I'd like to first thank our supervisor, District 5, for having a water forum that she had last week. I think it was outstanding. I hope that she put in her sessions that she has continuous what Director Rowley asked about a bond for the county. If we can have a talk about a bond for the county that could help us with the Seaside Basin and all these other projects. I hope she put that in one of her meetings that we have, just to find out. But I want to thank her for her outstanding presentation. I enjoyed it. It was short and sweet, and we got some good comments out of it. So I would like to just see that Director Rowley bond thing comes out, and let's see how the county talk and feel about that. My next item, I think we need a water supply committee meeting on some issues. I received a letter from Monterey Mayor Robeson on housing, on how we can move these projects forward, and we need to have a meeting on that. Plus, we need to discuss Marina with that project. That's another one we need to discuss and drill out. But the mayor had a letter that, how can we get off of 9510? I believe we need to write the state and tell them that we got projects and give them a timeline on it. But we need to have a water supply meeting, and there's other issues that we need to discuss too. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
I'll add that the mayor's letter made Cal Matters this morning, and so now it's pretty much statewide.
Wow.
Well, we need to answer something. We need to put something out on all these letters that we're getting. So we need to have a water supply meeting so we can get started on it. Thank you, Mayor, for your letter.
Let's schedule that as soon as possible. Director Riley.
I just support this effort. I just think it's unbelievable that the State Water Resources Control Board sits on the CDO restrictions when we are on the verge of accomplishing so much, and also having proposals for them that they could easily approve. I know we're small potatoes to there because they're statewide, but still, it's very important to this community. And I just hope we push that. Thank you, Alvin, and thank you, Mary.
Just one more before with me. Dave, you need to find out how good our material is for Measure J and how long it's going to be how long it lasts before we got to refresh the whole thing.
Yeah.
What the public needs to know, and I need to know. So we're going to move on this, but we need to know how long that material is good for. Thank you.
Supervisor Adams, I think. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment on the forum that we held, the first regional water forum that we did hold last Tuesday, and thank all of you because so many of you were there. It was really terrific. We had a number of people in the chambers, but we had almost 200 people online that were listening in, and I think that shows that people have a real interest in what it is that we're trying to do. I think that the next forum that we're going to do is tentatively planned for June 21st. And we're going to focus more on regional scale management actions and some potential regional projects. And I would think that the thought of a bond would be part of that discussion because that certainly would be a regional project. Although we talked primarily about Northern Monterey County area for the last, which was the focus of the first presentation that we did. It didn't just include our district. It did touch on Pure Water Monterey project and the expansion. So I'm hoping that at the next one, we have an opportunity to focus on that a little bit more. But it would be absolutely inappropriate for me to say, oh, thank you so much, without saying there was such a slew of people who did so much work on this, primarily Donna Myers from the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, Brent Buki from the Monterey County Water Resources Agency, and then my own Chief of Staff, Sarah Hargrave, just really put the time and effort into make what I thought was a really amazing presentation. It was interesting and understandable. And I think those are two things that are pretty important when it comes to water. So just wanted to thank you all for your support on doing this. And I'm looking forward to the next one and see if we can just keep moving forward with, you know, as I said to people, you have to put your biases behind you and your guns at the door and see what we can come up with. So we're working on it.
Thank you. Very, very promising start. Other reports? Okay, if not, let's now move on to item 9, the water supply strategy, quarterly water supply strategy.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Chair Paul, members of the board. This will be public hearing. Item 9, consider adoption of April through June 2022 quarterly water budget and strategy. So Joelle, if you can share my presentation, please. Thank you. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. So the budget period again is April to June 2022. This budget is, as always, developed to be compliant with all of the state board orders that talk about how much and the timing of how water can be produced from the Monterey resources system, and as well as it is consistent with the Rule 160 targets set by this board. The components of the project are our ASR operations. We're within the permitted window for injection, which is December through the end of May, and we're waiting for stream flow to come back up. We would need pretty substantial rains since we're down, the river is down at about 20 cubic feet per second, and the targets would need to be sustained at above 120 at Highway 1. So we would need so a couple inches of rain to sustain some injection on this project. Table 13 is a water right that also has the same in-stream flow requirements attached to it, and we're in the same case waiting for that to rains to come so we can use that water right. In the water budget, as we do always, is we identify wells in the Carmel Valley that would be used or could be used should the conditions change. So we're not without assets that can operate these projects. The Pure Water Monterey operations will continue to recover through these months about 375 acre feet per month and inject about 300 acre feet per month over the next quarter of the water budget. Thank you, Joelle. The other assumptions that went into this is that we will attempt to use all of the Seaside Basin coastal sub areas native water during the water year 2022 for customer supply. We assume that ASR and Table 13 injections will continue if stream flow allows. And this is a table that we talked about at the last quarterly budget that was forecasting the different activities that are going on in the Seaside Basin with the tracer test related to Pure Water Monterey, using ASR 3 now full-time for recovery, requiring the parallel pipeline. And we'll be moving into for this component of the budget, the last two, April and May, which I've put the square around, that tells you what of those projects will be limiting. Basically, we'll be able to inject in ASR 1 and 2, and we should expect about 10 acre feet per day should we be able to operate ASR. This quarterly budget was developed on March 14th, 2022 by the Quarterly Water Budget Group, which is us, California American Water, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and NOAA, along with the State Water Resources Control Board. Next slide, please. This is we exist in the area that is just on the cusp of equal chances of precipitation to slightly below normal forecast for precipitation for the next 3 months. So should this hold, we would likely have possibly another rainstorm, hopefully, and be able to inject. If not, this year will look a lot like it did last year, where we had one big storm and one big flow event in the Carmel River system. Next slide, please. So this is the table that breaks down where all the water would come from to achieve those goals. We can see that there is ASR and Table 13 operations possible through April and May. And then sometime in May, we think we'll hit what's called the low flow trigger. And that is a flow below 20 cubic feet per second, 5 consecutive days at the Don Juan Bridge out in Garland Park. At that point in time, a subset of this group meets and decides what to do with the storage in Los Padres Reservoir, how to release it most efficiently to the environment to support fish flows and riparian habitat. That will be brought to you once the group meets after that triggered event will happen. And this is the same table that was included in my staff note. So the totals that would be needed for the entirety to meet the goals of this quarterly water budget are on the bottom of this slide. So next slide, please. This is to talk a little bit and foreshadow a little bit for an item coming up, which is an action item, is that in the Seaside adjudication, due to the triennial ramp downs scheduled in the adjudication, the allocation for Cal-Am has dropped to 0 acre-feet per year, and it did that in water year 2018. So in response to that, Cal-Am has completed an intertie between the Ryan Ranch and Bishop systems to the main system to serve these satellite systems. We know that water demand for all of the Cal-Am customers is about 300 acre-feet a year through these 3 satellite systems. Only Hidden Hills will be supplied from a well in the Laguna Seca, and there has been a replenishment assessment agreement with the Seaside Water Master that will address this pumping. And we can see that we're going to be in the April, May, June portion of the water year. And this is the relative percent breakdown per the entirety of the year. So we're headed into some June and July and August being some of the biggest months. And that with June being one of the first biggest months happening at the end of this quarter of the water year. So next slide, please. So staff recommendation is to adopt this proposed water supply budget for the main water distribution system of Cal-Am for this moving into the 3rd quarter of water year 2022, the April to June 2022 period. So and that concludes my public hearing presentation.
Thank you, John. Questions? Director Riley.
John, I'd like to know if there's a prognosis more than just 3 months about the demands that I'm going to call it the relative grade, needs for water, and coming from Cal-Am or the allocation process that you guys go through. Where's the trend line? And 3 months, the 3 month plan, I don't have any questions about that, but I do have a little question about what does a year or 2 years out look like? Is there a trend that suggests there's more problems here than we're seeing quarterly to quarterly? Or are there issues that need to be addressed? I'm not looking for answers necessarily, but I'm looking for a sense of what the prognosis looks like.
I don't know, Dave, do you want to, since we were just talking about this?
Yeah. Well, 2 years is actually the window that's going to be the most challenging. So, we used to be, we look at storage. I mentioned earlier, almost 30,000 acre feet in the Carmel Valley alluvial aquifer. When there was no limit on pumping, that is what provided some comfort as to how many years of supply do we have sitting there. But now if you can only take 3,300 acre feet, 3,400 acre feet out legally, then all that extra water doesn't matter. So it's going to come down to more a question about, is there production capacity constraints, and are there plumbing constraints in moving the water to where it's needed? And so for the next really 30 months or 2.5 years, I think those are going to be the primary questions. That the trend lines aren't really going to matter, because now even with a couple of dry years in a row, the amount of storage in the alluvial aquifer and the Carmel River is multiple years of the legal water right. So we can endure a 3-year drought, 4-year drought even, based on storage that's already in the ground and that legal water right. It's the places where we have more concern are competition for production in the Pure Water Monterey, City of Seaside area, and whether we can get water out of the ground and into the Monterey pipeline and then get it up the hill. There's a couple of pump stations that Cal-Am's got coming online shortly that'll be able to move water up the hill. But the forecasting of available supply versus demand, the trends aren't the problem. The real problem are going to be, what do the RENA numbers mean and how realistic are those, the housing numbers? I would argue that they're not realistic from a water supply planning perspective, but they're written on paper, and you can't look the other way. We have to look at that and what that means for future supplies, and then getting the water that is available out of the ground and to the places it's needed. So even if supplies exceed demands, can we get it? Can we get it out? And can we move it? But after that, with a new permanent long-term water supply, yes, climate's going to be an issue, but remember, again, 1 or 2 normal years will have 3 times the impact on storage in the alluvial aquifer than it used to, because now you'll be only taking out what's legally allowed, which is a small number.
Am I going down the road of the mouse that roared? I mean, is this a big issue, just a legitimate issue? There's a difference.
Well, so, we talked a little bit about the letter to the state on housing. We would have trouble demonstrating right now that we have all the water we need for the housing that's being suggested. But as soon as you have a water purchase agreement in hand and you let construction contracts for the expansion, then it's just a matter of schedule. And many of these housing projects won't come online and have a huge demand for a number of years. Just getting entitled, just trying to get the hotel built in Pacific Grove, they're probably still a year away from all the entitlements they need. And then you start building. So it's a three-year away project. So many of these, the impacts will come home to roost once there's a new permanent water supply on hand. So I don't think it's the mouse that roared or Chicken Little. But it's our problem is really the 2.5 to 3 year problem, not the long-term problem. RENA numbers notwithstanding, because you're not going to build everything they've asked you to build in 8 years. But you're also not going to get their attention to lift the CDO until you've actually got a project that's green-lighted, because otherwise, in their paternalistic fashion, even though we know that as of January 1, the legal limits come down to 3,376 acre-feet off the river. They still want to be in the position of saying, well, we don't want you, the community, to blow through that number inadvertently because you've over-allocated water. So we're going to keep the CDO in place until you can clearly demonstrate you've got a new permanent supply. So, we're going to be stuck here in a mode unless they decide to selectively not enforce that condition 2 and allow some things to move forward, even while leaving the CDO in place. So again, I think our problem area is the short term. It's not the long term. Now, if housing actually does get developed at these new numbers, then what looks to us to be a 32-year supply window with pure water expansion could end up being a 20-year window. But that's not a bad problem to have, because it means you're getting housing. We still need a 10-year forward-looking horizon to get a water supply project built. But pure water Monterey expansion should do an awful lot for us. And climate change be damned, that's not going to be the issue here in the near term.
And then I this may be a new topic, but and rule me out of order if that's appropriate. What's the timing, do you think, for the district to initiate an allocation process review?
Yep. And as soon as the next project, the next permanent chunk of new water is permitted, it's going to take 19 to 20 months between the approval of a water purchase agreement and the completion of pure water expansion. And that would be the 20 months you need to do an allocation process. And so the goal under allocation would be to take a portion of the new supply and declare that it's available for each of the jurisdictions, allocated perhaps to a combination of the RENA numbers and other stated needs. But yeah, it's going to take us, depending on what the environmental requirements are, it'll take us a year to 18 months to do that.
And that's after the supply is kind of reasonably pinned down.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Would it be helpful to try and create a timeline of these, the additional water supply coming online and the allocation and the lifting of this, the ideal or realistic time that we get the CDO lifted? Would that be helpful to bring that to a future meeting?
Yeah, I think it would be good. We did it once before, but I think the board has changed quite a bit. And so even just the process of lifting the CDO and the moratorium on meters, which are two separate items, bears some revisiting. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, well, we're gonna, I know, discuss Mayor Roberson's letter and request in the committees, and I'm sure it'll be back to this board very soon. And that might be helpful as part of that discussion.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we have two letters for consideration. One is the mayor's letter to the State Water Board and its implications. And then there's a second letter to us as the district, dealing with some of the meaning or impact of the RENA numbers and some local issues. So we need to deal with both.
Both would, yes. Mayor Roberson, did you want to say anything about this?
No, you've all very articulately stated the case.
Thank you for starting the discussion.
All right.
That needs to happen, difficult one. Okay. All right. So, any other questions or comments about the proposed water supply strategy and budget?
Just one more to John. Pure Water Monterey, have that hit our taps yet?
We're doing the tracer test, and the water has shown up at the monitor wells that are in between the injection wells and Peralta. And we got a result back last week that the tracer dye may be starting to show up. There are two methods that you test for it. One is a charcoal filter pack that's placed in a flow cell, and you run water over it for 6 hours, and a grab sample. And the sample did not have dye in it, but the filter pack had very low levels of dye. So we think that it's just starting to get into the range we can detect it at Peralta as of last week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, you do have one member of the public, or two members of the public, that wish to speak.
Thank you. Let's hear their comments now.
Sarah, please share the timer. And Tom, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, good evening. Tom Raleigh from the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. It's interesting to hear the comments on the long-range needs. I'm aware that in Honolulu, City and County of Honolulu, they have managed to actually contaminate the major grounds where they have most of the water system for the island, and that's about 900,000 population. They have people living in hotels from Navy housing because of this. Reason I mention that is, earlier this year we shifted from basically 2/3 Carmel Valley, 1/3 Seaside Basin. We flipped that, so it's basically 2/3 Seaside Basin, 1/3 Carmel Valley, 3376 for Carmel Valley. We are putting so many eggs into the basket of the Seaside basket. It's only 4 or 5 years ago that we had somebody throw the wrong switch, or a switch failed, and we had pollution pumped into the bay. Some of us are very aware of that. Could be a personnel error, could be whatever it is. But if the Seaside Basin should ever get contaminated, we are going to be between a rock and a hard place. So I call this to your attention. I'm familiar with this, what happened over in Hawaii. It was predicted it was going to happen. It did happen, and it was tried to be covered up. And so the thing is, this is a problem that you need to think about in long range, is diversification of your future water supply. And we know that the only thing that will help that will be a desal project. And that is one of the reasons our organization has repeatedly submitted that a desal project is needed to diversify our future water needs. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rowley. And we have one more, I believe. Member of the public who wishes to speak. Joel, is there another?
Yeah, so Tom Rowley already made his comment.
Yes.
Anna Thompson. Okay. Anna, when you're ready, please present your comment. Anna, you could unmute yourself.
Sorry. Okay. I was thinking about having a third water supply, and I don't think it is the desalination that would be the right approach. I think that we should use water banking by building ponds to collect and hold any water that would otherwise flow directly into the ocean. As an example, a few years ago, the Irvine Ranch Water District, in partnership with the Rosedale Rio Bravo Water Storage District, constructed 502 acres of groundwater recharge ponds in Kern County, which is far away from Irvine, to allow available surface water to be percolated into the groundwater basin with the intent of using this saved water in case of an emergency, or like the case that the prior speaker was talking about, or for during extended periods of drought. And that would be much more less expensive, and it will be always there, the water, that extra water to be used. And it's the best way to deal with the drought, and having a different water source at a different location that could be used for emergencies and extended droughts. The Irvine Water District rejected the desalination, and is building all kinds of different water banking projects in different areas of the state. So I think that would be good to look at what the Irvine Ranch Water District has been doing, and has a variable sources of way how to get the different water that we need, and they are in a great place. So there's no reason why we should not choose the same choice before considering any desalination plant. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And Chair Paul, I do not see any members of the public with their hands raised. I do see Tom Rowley's hand up again. But he's already made his comment.
He's already spoken, yeah. So
Right.
that did lead us into a discussion of longer range water supply strategy, when we were only going to, but there's a reason. The short term and the long term, of course, are related. So I don't think there's any harm done. Yes, Director Riley.
I just move approval of the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any comments before we vote? Okay, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Yes, Director Edwards,
Approval?
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Roberson,
Yes.
Director Malik,
Yep.
Vice Chair Adams,
Oh, you're muted.
Vice Chair Adams,
Sorry. Aye.
Chair Paw.
Yes,
This is what the background looks like.
Motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
thank you. And we can now move on to our action items. The first is for you to consider approval of an amendment to our general manager's, a contract with a general manager. And I'm sure you've seen the recommendation from our little ad hoc subcommittee that you appointed that was composed of Director Edwards, Roberson, and me. And just to remind you, what we're proposing is very simple. It's to extend the contract by 5 years, subject to performance, satisfactory performance that's supposed to be done annually. And we completed our most recent evaluation, I believe it was January recently. And the salary increases would be essentially the same as what the professional staff is getting for the next 3 years, with the, except that he would lose, because he would lose several months pay increase because unless we went back retroactively back to July 1st, he would lose those months from July 1st to March and lose that salary increase, but otherwise would be the same amounts as the professional staff is getting. And so this is what we're suggesting. It's quite simple. We discussed it, we discussed it with Dave Stolt. The only other thing I want to add is that if Dave were working for an investor on utility, say, he would be getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars more in a very different looking package. And the compensation is modest compared to all that he does for the district, in my opinion. Any comments or questions?
I make a motion.
Public comment.
Madam Chair, you have a member of the public that wishes to speak on this matter.
So we do, thank you. Okay.
Sarah, could you share the timer? And at this time, I would like to invite Tom Rowley. Tom, when you're ready, please present your comment.
I have my hand lowered.
We still see your hand raised. Did you mean to lower it, Mr. Rowley?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. It says shows lower. I said lower hand on my computer, but
Okay,
it
now
keeps
it's down.
up.
Now it's down.
No.
Thank you.
Sure you don't want to comment on that?
Okay, at
thing?
this time, I would like to invite Susan Schiavone. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you. I just want to put a shout out to Dave Stolt and thank him so much for his service to the district. He goes 200% all the time. I'm very impressed with what he does, and I very much respect him. And he deserves everything he gets and more, I know. But yes, please do give him his raise and contract. Thank you very much, Dave.
Now your hand just went up, Susan. All right, it's down now. Are there other members of the public who wish to comment?
Paul, I did not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to.
Thank you.
I
Okay,
make a
so
motion now.
thank you. So you,
I make a motion to approve with gratitude to David Salt.
Very nice.
Thank you.
I second that.
Thank you. Let's take a vote, please.
Yes, Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes, keep up the good work.
Director Riley,
Yes, with accolades.
Director Roberson,
Yes, with appreciation.
Director Malik,
Yes, with gratitude twice.
Vice Chair Adams,
Yes, in solidarity.
Chair Paul.
Yes, with my great respect and gratitude.
The motion passes on a vote of 7.
I just want to say thank you very much for your confidence in me. You're a joy to work with because you're committed, you're studious, and you're collegial with each other. Makes it very easy for me to do my job. Thank you.
All right.
And a 5-year agreement just means you don't really know how old I am.
Or how young you are. Okay. And now we're going to consider approval of extension of our contract with our district council, or general council. Dave, do you want to, Dave?
Yeah, I'll introduce this one. This is a 3-year agreement. The previous 3-year agreement expired December 31st. It was extended on a month-to-month basis on the previously existing terms. This new proposed 3-year agreement extends those same terms into this next period. Either party can dissolve the agreement with notice at any point in time. But I still think it's a significant vote of confidence to our district council to enter into a 3-year agreement and tell them that we're relying on them to continue the good work.
Well said. Thank you. Any questions? Do we have a motion?
I make one.
Public comment?
Is there any public comment on this item?
Yes.
Susan Schiavone.
Sarah, if you could share the timer. Sarah, if you could share the. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
I just want to also give Dave Laredo a shout out and thank him for all his service to the district. And I'm glad that this will be long-term. I really appreciate all the work he does. Thank you.
Next, we have Anna Thompson. Anna, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, I wanted to raise my hand before too, but I didn't find it soon enough. But anyhow, I share the same views that Susan Schiavone just said about both our manager and the council. So I appreciate them considerably, and I'm so happy that I'm very grateful and happy with everybody in the district, and in particular the general manager and the council and all the directors and everybody in the staff. Thank you very much. Yes, I approve it. To go ahead and approve it.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. And Sarah, you could stop the screen share. Chair Paul, I did not see anybody with their hands raised, so I return this back to the board.
Thank you. I too have great confidence in you, Dave Laredo, and we are really fortunate to have such a great general counsel and general manager. So we had a
Thank you for the
motion
motion.
to approve the recommendation.
Yes, me.
Okay. And did we have a
And with
second?
many thanks to David Laredo.
Second by Director Anderson.
Very grateful for both of them.
Thank you. George?
Well, just as a comment on the motion, I will support it absolutely. But I do want to just add that Dave has been Laredo has been very open to individual directors who have questions, comments, curiosity, something, whatever it might be. And he's been very open to me, and I don't want to necessarily increase the traffic that he might have to deal with. But I do want to compliment him for being very responsive to my questions, and I thank him for that.
Other comments?
Yeah, just a quick thank for Dave from me, Alvin. He done an outstanding job. And he's still working hard, no matter what kind of troubles and tribulations he has someplace else. He still comes to the district with a good attitude. And I appreciate that.
Well said. I do too. Okay, let's vote.
Director Malik,
Yes.
Director Roberson,
Yes, with admiration.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes.
Motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
So, Madam Chair, if I could just say that I really appreciate this. I have to say, working with the district, with your staff has been really one of the great joys of my life, and I continue to enjoy it thoroughly. So thank you all.
Great working with you. All right. We are well set to continue our work going forward. And what do we have next?
So this item is
Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, Larry Hampson will introduce this item.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair and directors. So Joelle, could you put up the presentation for item 12? Thanks. So this is to consider approval of funds and a contract for work at the Sleepy Hollow Steelhead rearing facility to replace some tanks and electrical parts at the facility. And next slide, please. So the work would consist of demolishing, removing 6 fiberglass tanks of 8-foot diameter and 1 4-foot diameter fiberglass tank. These tanks are used for quarantining fish, and they are also used to mix up a salt solution for injecting into the rearing channel to control disease. The existing chillers would be removed along with the associated infrastructure. There would be excavation underneath the existing tanks, placement of structural fill, and pouring concrete slabs. And there would be placement of 5 new tanks that are on site currently, and reconnecting all of the plumbing and electrical and air lines, taking 2 of those tanks that are demolished and using them for salt tanks. There would also be new pumps and air-cooled water chiller units that would help cool the water for summertime for the fish that are being brought into the facility. And then there would be an upgrade, or actually a replacement of an existing panel board, 240 volt, that has been recommended for replacement. And as sort of an aside, this facility was built in 1995 and 1996, and although there were a couple of $1 million worth of improvements made, the scope of work here is to replace items that were built back in 1996 that have reached the end of their life and need replacement. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is just a picture showing the existing tanks. Some of them have settled over time, some of them are cracked. And so this is just a picture showing you what would be demoed, and 5 new tanks would be put into this deck area here. And next slide. And this is just showing in the center left, some of the graphics didn't come through, but that's a chiller that would be moved. And it just shows you a couple of the tanks that are used for salt solutions. Those tanks would be in the foreground. Those tanks would be removed and replaced with new tanks. Or I'm sorry, they would be replaced with tanks that are still usable for the purposes of salt solution from the existing site. And next slide. Yeah, here we go. Here's a picture of the large chiller that would be removed, and there's some electrical sub panels to be replaced, along with all the plumbing and infrastructure that you see in the photo. And next slide. So the district did receive 2 bids. They were pretty close together. I mean, within about 7%. Monterey Peninsula Engineering's bid was lowest at $233,500. Telemetrics came in just above that at $250,500. Staff is recommending contracting with MPE for not to exceed amount of $233,500. However, because we don't know exactly what's underneath the quarantine decks and some of the infrastructure that's there, we do request a contingency amount of $29,000, which is about 12.5% of the contract amount, in case we do run into unforeseen circumstances. So the total funding authorization for this project, if you approve it, would be for $262,500. That is currently above the budgeted amount for this item, and there would need to be a budget, or there would need to be payment from contingency funds for this. I believe it's approximately about $170,000 more than what is currently in the budget. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that board or public have.
Thank you, Larry. Looks like Director Malak has a question.
I have a number of questions. First is, how is it that the engineer's estimate is $75,000 to $105,000, and we're getting bids about 2.5 times the engineer's estimate? I do understand the issue of supply chain and all that stuff, but that is a vast, huge amount to pay over an engineer's estimate. And second question I have is, how serious is this work needing to be done now rather than wait another year and see if the marketplace changes? The third question is the engineering done in a appropriate manner? And I'm not qualified to make any comment on that, but why does the engineer's estimate is so different from what the prices we're getting? That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Malak. A lot of these questions were asked and answered at the administrative committee, I believe it was, or it might have been another, I think that was the committee meeting where it was discussed. I'll let Larry respond.
Well, it is a great question about the engineer's estimate and why the bids came in so much higher. It's a tight labor market. It seems that a lot of construction has gone up recently. Engineers' estimates, as you know, are based on the past. I think the whole construction industry, residential, non-residential, has been moving pretty quickly to higher costs. So I think there is the supply chain issue. There's also the labor issue, and to some extent, I think perhaps there's the unknown about Sleepy Hollow. Perhaps these the contractors are looking at the project going, well, we're not real sure about what we're getting into, and so they're putting in enough to deal with unknowns, I think. Should we wait and see if we get a better price? Myself, it's hard to speculate on that. You know, there's been a backlog in the construction industry for some time. Is that going to clear out in the next year? I don't know. My sense is that the price isn't going to go down. It's only going to go up. We know about you know, the reports of inflation, you know, highest in 40 years. So no, I don't think that waiting is going to get you a better price. Is the engineering appropriate? The Tetra Tech has been in this business for quite a long time. They've done a number of very large projects. They were the designers of the upgrade facility. You know, we worked pretty well with them in the past. I worked pretty well with them to develop these plans, and I reviewed them all myself. I think the engineering is appropriate. In fact, I think it's good. I think what you'll get out of this is something that will be around for you know, decades, if this work goes forward.
Also, you know, as I recall, because I asked the same question as you did, Director Malik, at the committee meeting, if we didn't approve this project and have it done basically right away, we'd have to wait. We would lose a whole season. Isn't that right, Larry? We wouldn't be able to do the project until the following season because of the seasonal conditions. Isn't that right?
That's correct. The facility needs to be back online and operational by mid-May. Given you saw John Lear's presentation on water supply, you know, given the current drought we're in, the facility will probably be operated well into the fall, probably midwinter, and so there won't be an opportunity to do any more work until perhaps January of next year.
So we would not have the benefit of the improved chilling on, you know, for this coming summer season.
Correct, right.
Yeah. Other questions? Or
Yes, John, through the chair. Larry, do we have a timeline on how long it's going to take to get this done? We want the facility running in May. If the work is not finished or done, what is the penalty for it?
The penalty is $1,000 per day, liquidated damages. So the deadline is May 15th, and the district would start assessing that penalty starting May 16th.
Okay.
It's a tight timeline. Basically, they'll have about 6 weeks.
And they say they can do it?
Well, they signed up, or they will sign up to do it.
All right. That's all I got for right now. I hear from the public. And
okay. All right, let's see if any members of I see one member of the public would like to comment.
All right, you can show the timer. And John Tilley, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you, Joelle. Thank you, board members. John Tilley, member of the public. Speaking for the fish, let's go ahead and approve this. It's obvious that the fish don't have a choice, but we do. And the idea of the alluvial aquifer being our chosen water source doesn't work for them. And we have other choices. So speaking as an environmentalist, please approve this. Thank you very much. It's well worth the cost of it.
Thank you. Okay. Well, the administrative committee recommended approval after asking lots of questions, including ones we just heard. Is there a motion?
I move approval. Speak on second.
A second.
Thank you. Hey, we had the material for this day on order, but the only fault I have on this one it was put in a mid-year adjustment. And it came out of the mid-year adjustment a month later. So we didn't save no money on that. That's why I'm aggravated. If we got a project going down the line, we do not put it in mid-year adjustment as a savings. Because that project, we're spending a little bit more than what we basically put in there. So that's my only comment on it. I hope we get this completed on time. I'm going to be watching it to make sure it's on time. If it's not, I want action taken on that. Thank you.
With that. Okay. Let's have a vote, please.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Roberson,
Aye.
Director Malik,
No.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Vice Chair Adams, Chair Paul.
Yes.
And just to confirm, Vice Chair Adams, that was an aye, correct?
That was an aye, correct.
All right, good to go. The motion passes on a vote of 6-1.
Thank you. Okay. Next item. 13. Who's going to present this?
This is
Mute. Yeah, go ahead, John.
okay. Thank you, Dave. Good evening again, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is action item 13 to consider adopting the resolution 2209, which will modify the Rule 160 to incorporate the water resources projects that we've been building on the peninsula into the table structure of the rule, thus returning the rule back to the function that it had when we did not have water resources projects. So Joel, if you could bring my slide deck up, please. Thank you. So next slide, please. Just a quick review for the board. Rule 160, it specifies, we go through this process at the beginning of every water year, and it specifies the production targets and how we're going to meet them from the different sources. It has implications with the water conservation and standby rationing plan. If we go over values in these tables, we can go into different rationing levels. It has a set of 3 tables in it that specify the monthly and year-to-date goals and rationing triggers for all of the calcium sources within the Peninsula resource system. But what it does not take into account is the source as we switch over to pure water Monterey and move off the river. The way the tables are set up is not correctly capturing that, as well as it's not correctly capturing the intertie and how we're now treating the production in the Laguna Seca systems due to the quarterly water budget process. So next slide, please, Joel. This is just a review of, for this water year, this is what you considered when you did the Rule 160 at the beginning of the water year. So we would take all of our sources from the Monterey Peninsula system and bring them all together and then allocate them out through the year. So if we would go to the next slide. I'm going to start with table 2 of the current rule. What this is the Laguna Seca allocation. It used to be treated differently in the satellite systems before they became an intertie. You can see that since the allocation is 0, this table has just become a set of zeros with a total of 0 and monthly production limits of 0. The proposal in the resolution is to change the values that are presented in this table to be the values of the sum total of all the projects that are available to us to produce. So for example, it would be the 3,500 of injection that is available to be produced out of Pure Water Monterey. You would add Sand City desal plant into this. If you had planned to do some ASR recovery over this water year, if you were in a drought and had some in supply, you could allocate that to this table. So if we could go to the next slide. This is the table that shows what's out of the water resource system. You would take this, and this is table 1. This one would largely remain. This table would take and add into these totals the totals from table 2. So now we would be working with the full supply of the district as we forecast forward through the year and how we're going to meet the demand from the available supplies. So it's effectively replacing the table that's summarizing the satellite systems, which is now not doing anything, and summarize and bringing in the supplies from the water resources systems so we can allocate them throughout the whole water year from all sources available to us. So the table structure would then be how we plan to meet demand from all sources, and then the breakdown of the other demands and where they come from in the following tables. So if we go to the next slide, please, Joel. And then we see here, there was a request by the Sierra Club a number of years ago to add table 3 to Rule 160, and table 3 would largely remain the same. And it is the monthly allocation and yearly allocation out of the river. So this year it's 4110. Next year it would be the 3376, and just the numbers of how we allocated projects for meeting monthly demand would switch around. But the total at the end of the year for this year is 4110 and 3376 for next water year. So next slide, please. So our recommendation from staff is that the board adopt this to change this rule, and then direct staff to incorporate these changes of these tables into Rule 160 of the rules and regulations. And that thus bringing the intent of Rule 160 back into effectiveness by incorporating all sources available for supply to meet demand back into the rule. And that concludes my staff presentation.
Thank you, Larry. Is there a reason this wasn't taken to the water supply planning committee earlier? Is that because that committee hasn't met for?
This was taken to the water supply committee a number of months ago. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what month, but the recommendation was to bring it to the full board.
Thank you. Okay, good. Questions? Director Riley, and then.
No, I just have a question about the word triennial or triannual.
Triennial is every 3 years. So there was a 10% reduction in the standard producers of 10% every 3 years, as lined out in the seaside adjudication decision.
And the reason I asked the question is triennial, I agree with you. Triannual is 3 times a year. It's a very subtle difference between how you say the word and how you print the word. But I agree with your definition of how you used it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. If we didn't do this, how much trouble we would get in if we didn't run up these numbers like we're doing right now?
I believe there would be no trouble because there have been changes in the actual other rules that are affected by this rule. Through the Water Demand Committee have made changes so that we didn't preemptively enter rationing. However, the intent was always to come back and fix the actual math of the rule, and that needed to go through the water supply and not the water demand.
So with this chart right now, in the future, do we have to go through the water? I know it's connected to the water rationing plan. Do we have to revisit that the way we're going, or what?
Rule 160 itself is to establish the tables and to establish the triggers for the water rationing plan. So it really doesn't get into how the rationing plan works.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? And we haven't taken this out to the public. Shall we see if there's any member of the public that wants to comment?
Yes, just as a reminder, if you would like to make public comment, please raise your hand. And Chair Paul, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I return this back to the board.
Yeah, triannual is actually misspelled here in the second paragraph of the memo, but it doesn't matter. It's only the memo, and we know, we understand what was intended was triannual, so. Okay, all right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve it with the corrections and the spelling or whatever.
I'll second that.
Okay, let's take a vote.
Director Malik,
Yes.
Director Roberson,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes,
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes,
Motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
thank you. Item 14.
Yes, Stephanie Locke, are you ready to introduce this item? There we go.
Yes, sorry. I was trying to figure out what was going on with my video. So this item is a resolution to amend table 4, which is the water efficiency credits. And so staff went to the Water Demand Committee earlier this month, as well as the Technical Advisory Committee, to request review of the water credit for installing a rainwater or gray water plumbing system to flush toilets and wash laundry. And we've come across certain concerns that we have. There are not very many of these systems in place in Monterey County. There are a great number of potential issues related to the installation of the systems and enforcement of the various different conditions that are required to put them in. And so we brought this to the attention of these different committees. The Technical Advisory Committee discussed it on March 2nd. And the TAC thought that essentially any way to obtain credits is really important right now because of the lack of water. And so they were not supportive of changing or eliminating this potential water credit. And then 2 days later, or the next day, actually, we brought it to the Water Demand Committee. And at that meeting, there was really unanimous support for eliminating this credit for the time being, because we just, like I said, we just don't have the information. We don't have the ability to enforce and look at all of the different things that have to be done. And your staff report has a lot of that information in the background. And so hopefully everybody took a look at that, because it's really complicated. And there is a lot of potential for problems related to not only cross connection, but supply issues and reporting issues. So the Water Demand Committee unanimously recommended that we amend the table and delete the credit for gray water and rainwater systems for toilet flushing and closed washing at this time. We also definitely want to continue supporting the rebate program, which provides a rebate for both of these types of systems. It's just that right now there's a question about reliability for putting it in and relying on it to be able to flush your toilets and wash your laundry. So this evening, the recommendation is that the board approve resolution 2020-208, amending Rule 25.5, Table 4, to eliminate the credit for the installation of rainwater, gray water systems to flush toilets or wash laundry. And like I said, hopefully you all read all the different conditions that are required to actually put one of these systems in. It's really complex, and if you have any questions, I can help you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Questions? Yes, Director Malik.
What's the rebate for if these systems are removed?
At this time, the district hasn't permitted any system for credit. I'm aware of 3 potential systems, and I think we'll go ahead and let those come through if they actually can meet all the different requirements. But yeah, we have not yet permitted one of those systems.
So what do you mean by rebate?
We offer a rebate for the both the laundry to landscape or gray water system, where you're replacing some water use with a gray water system, as well as we offer a rebate for rainwater catchment.
But if you are eliminating these, then what is the rebate for?
What we're eliminating is the credit. So right now on our credit table, it's a really super small credit,
right?
But we would be eliminating that credit for putting in this type of a system to offset your toilets or your clothes washers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the Technical Advisory Committee views credits as water that can facilitate, you know, an ADU or another unit or what have you. And we felt for the purpose of creating wet water for an actual usage, that there just wasn't proven enough technology that, well, take for example, you know, if you sized it for normal rainfall, but you're trying to flush toilets and you get into a 2 to 3 year drought, you're not really going to have it. So you're going to rely more heavily on your cross connection with Cal-Am.
Right.
So the savings aren't really there on the one hand. But if we still provide a rebate, then over a greater period of time, there should be some net benefit to the system as a whole. But we're not creating a public health issue over actually offering a credit that can then be built against to achieve something else, as if that water is going to reliably be there from that, you know, that piece of the project. So, you know, it's kind of inconsistent to offer a rebate and not a credit, but we think it's closer to how things are actually going to physically function, that you'll get some benefit by promoting these projects, but let's not treat it like wet water that's fully reliable to build some other project with.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes.
My question, Stephanie, we just had a hearing on these a couple of years ago, right? Back in 2019 and 2020. And some gentleman came in, I think some building in Monterey wanted to do it upstairs.
They did not do it.
They did not do it. Okay, so we have nobody out there that's going to come in and say, we approve this. Now I need some water for this. So it's nothing out there that we have to have.
So there are currently 3 projects.
Right.
That I've communicated with, and after talking with Dave Stoll, that we will allow them to move forward if they want to move forward. But at the moment, no, we have not issued any permits for the system. So
okay.
I think it really is appropriate right now to take care of this, because my concern has to do with, well, clearly this year is a really bad example of rainwater catchment.
Right.
And if somebody's trying to obtain water credits to offset another, you know, bathroom or an accessory dwelling unit, another unit, there just is not the supply. There's not a provable, consistent supply of water that would be safe to offset that unit. So I really think right now, until we have more data, it's not appropriate to give a credit.
Well, I agree with you, as long as people are not coming gonna run back into the district. We know how they did on, well, I had a water credit and I didn't, and I really didn't know I had it, but you said I could do this project. Now you're taking this project from me. You know, if it's building not in process now, you know, I believe you out of whack now. But if we approve something,
I think
I
we've
know-
got it covered.
Yeah, we opened the door and now we're closing the door, but anybody who got through the door while it was open, we'll go ahead and process under the.
Foot's in the door.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds fair. Director Riley, did you have a question or
I
comment?
have some concerns about the general public and the relationship of the district with the cities. First of all, climate change is driving more and more people to be interested in this idea. And I think with the ADU proposals or the promotions out of the state as well as locals will increase the interest in this option. I'm going to refer back to a letter that we got in the package today from a Danielle Bryan, who referenced the relationship between the district and the cities in having a kind of understanding or an agreement on how to proceed on some complicated issues. This is another one of those complicated issues. So I'm concerned that one, we're likely to see more requests for a project like this, rainwater, catchment and so on. And I'm concerned about the relationship the district has with 6 different or 7 with the county, different jurisdictions. And there may be different interests by individual cities. And how do we develop a policy or an approach that might work across 7 different jurisdictions? That's my concern. I don't mind supporting what you're doing so far. But I'm concerned about those 2 elements. We're likely to get more requests over the near term, and we're likely to face relationship issues or enforcement issues or enforcement relationships with 7 different other jurisdictions.
Any response to that, Director Malik?
Yeah, I can see the difference. If a city would allow it, then they can proceed. The only thing that the district is doing is not giving water credit for these units. So by all means, if a city will give a permit to do that stuff, all the power. But don't expect the district to give those crossed out credits from the list. So I think these are 2 different things.
Yeah, Director Malik's right. We still get to say, we'll help you pay for it. And we support it, but we don't believe it's currently predictably sufficient to issue a credit for it. I mean, it's a fine line. And there's a separate side story to the correspondence that you are referring to in letters received, where due to reassignment of people within the jurisdiction due to COVID, there was a breakdown in the referral for how permitting got done and so forth. So there were some things that there's a backstory that we can get you at some point.
If it's not related, I don't need to hear it right now.
Yeah, okay. But hopefully we offline will figure out how to address
And
that.
If I may, we do everything we can to have really good communication with the jurisdictions. And I think for the most part, that's true. I mean, case in point, my staff has been attending regular meetings with the city of Monterey. They have certain meetings set up every month. We go participate. And we also contact the other jurisdictions and offer to meet with them and set up different kinds of training and that kind of thing. So I would say overall, 95% of our conversations and communication with the jurisdictions is really good. There are occasional breakdowns, and in that one letters case, there was a breakdown, and it was just a matter of, it happened 2 months after the shutdown with COVID.
Hopefully there's a way, we don't have to talk about it here at the board meeting, but there's a way we can.
It's all taken care of.
It is? Yeah, great. Okay. Director Anderson.
Yeah, I thought that your explanation of all the things involved was really quite good, and just not permitting the use of captured rainwater for the functions of washing clothing or flushing a toilet does not mean that somebody can't have a rainwater collection thing to use for their irrigation, for instance.
Well, they absolutely can put it in.
Right.
The
Right,
closed-
that they could do that. That's not the problem. But all the problems you point out about maintaining these systems, which have to have a backflow, prevention and monitors into and out of the catchment systems, because of not wanting cross contamination. It just seems like it's a really complicated thing. And if you don't have a building manager, as you pointed out, it just makes complete sense to me why perhaps, I don't know if there's going to be advances in the way these are plumbed and run, but if there's enough rain to capture for irrigation, that would be a wonderful thing, wouldn't it? I don't know if we're going to have it, but people would like to do that too, because they pay for their irrigation water. So use it for irrigation. You don't have to use it for the flushing the toilet.
And they can.
Yeah.
They can choose to. It's just we're not going to establish a credit if they do so and say, okay, that amount of water is now permanently available for you to do yet something else.
Mm-hmm.
And the simplest example is there's a homeowner, go nameless, but we've seen the system, and it's rainwater catchment, and it supplies the washing machine. That's great, and it's neat, and it was a labor of love for that homeowner at that time. And when that home gets sold to the next person who's now got to maintain it, that next person may say, I don't want that tank in my backyard, or I don't want that system, or I don't trust the rainwater on my clothes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm yanking it out. Well, so now any savings that system might have had are gone. But if we had issued a 3/4 fixture unit count credit for use elsewhere, that purpose elsewhere is also going to be used. And so there's not only no savings, but there's actually an increase in use. And so, it's, you can imagine a lot of these. And we've seen some systems that are great. And I think keeping the rebate in place will help incentivize some of those. But the reliability, the consistency, and is it permanent water that's added to the system if you do it? The verdict's out.
Well, to me, it seems like the recommendation is well-founded, and I support it. Yes, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept as suggested.
To approve the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I think Director Edwards is trying to second it, but he's muted.
Yeah, I'll second it after you take it out to the public.
All right, let's do that.
No, they keep forgetting that.
All right, just as a reminder, if you would like to make public comment on this matter, please raise your hand. And Chair Paul, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I return this back to the.
Thank you. Okay, let's vote.
Yes, Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Robertson,
Yes.
Director Malik,
Yes.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes.
The motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
Thank you, and thank you, Stephanie. And the last action item we have for tonight is 15. I have to correct something I said earlier this evening. The board members who worked on this recommendation were Director Edwards and Mayor Roberson and me. And it was with Supervisor Adams that I worked on the coming up with a recommendation for Dave Stoll's contract, and I misspoke. I got those two mixed up. So
All right, you corrected it.
We were going to let it slide.
But all is fair in
You
love
did
and
good.
war.
You did good. All
We were
right.
going to let it slide, Karen.
Yeah, you were humoring me. Oh, okay. All right. So it's our last action item. You've got the recommendation. It's not a huge amount of change we're recommending, but there was, we just were trying to look for any reasonable way to streamline and minimize the either number of committees or meetings. So that was what we were looking at. You have the proposal before you, and I assume you've looked at it. I just want to say one thing, and that about it generally, and that is there's this kind of tension between wanting to give the committees the ability to decide how often they want to meet, which makes sense to me, except that the competing consideration is staff needs to plan and schedule and allocate their time and prepare for these meetings. And so they need predictability. So there's tension between those two things, and we tried to address that in the recommendations by suggesting how often we think the committees probably want to meet, and if they want to meet more often or less often, they can figure that out in consultation with staff. So any comments or questions?
I have one question about the Carmel River Advisory Committee.
Yep.
If I can just simply ask, it says that disband the committee in favor of a more recent system of stakeholder groups. I just like a description of what that means.
Yep, that's a very good question, and Chair Paul has asked it more than once. There currently is what's called the Carmel River Task Force, and it's a big tent, open tent to all of the stakeholder groups who have an interest in what's going on the Carmel River. So Carmel River Watershed Conservancy, Carmel River Steelhead Association, the State Water Board, Cal Fish and Wildlife, Trout Unlimited, a wide variety. And we've extended the invitation to folks who have sat on the Carmel River Advisory Committee. And so the Carmel River Advisory Committee meetings have not really been happening in the last couple of years in favor of this Carmel River Task Force. And also, when we started the Carmel River Advisory Committee, it was a much more local thing. There were certain river advocates, and we were just coming in as a district saying, hey, some work needs to be done here, and let's coordinate, and let's listen to what you think needs to be done and what we're capable of doing. And so it had a place, back in time, but now there's, it's one of the most heavily studied rivers on the western coast, and there are just that many more interested parties. And so this Carmel River Task Force has really broadened the appeal to every stakeholder, and as I said earlier, kind of taking care of the need for keeping the Carmel River Advisory Committee. So currently, I would say a majority of you directors have not appointed a person on the Carmel River Advisory Committee because we haven't come to you saying, hey, we need to fill up these appointees.
Well, and it just, I think historically, the interest in the Carmel River was related to the overdrafting. And now that we've reached the cusp of getting off the river and getting the take down, the pumping down to, the legal limit, I can see that loss of interest. But I'm curious still about whether this stakeholder group meets once a year, once every 6 months. Is it organized, or is it to be organized?
No, it's organized. It's approximately, I would say, on average, about 3 times a year. I see, Thomas, you're still here. I don't know if you can weigh in.
Yeah, I'm here. Do you want me to chime in a little bit?
Yeah.
So basically, the Carmel River Task Force meets 3 to 4 times a year. And there was actually members, Lauren Latendre was a Carmel River Advisory Committee member, and also the one who organized the task force. And so he got kind of, approached me saying, we're having too many meetings, we're talking about the same stuff at the Carmel River Advisory Committee and at the Carmel River Task Force. And one of the nice things about the task force is the regulators are usually present on either through a Zoom or conference call. So they get to hear all the concerns on the river and get to give feedback based on their rules and regulations. Whereas the Carmel River Advisory Committee, when it was initially started, as Dave said, was very project focused and how to allocate funds when the district's restoration program was in its infancy. And there was lots of projects to do, and we really needed kind of help choosing what to do and start on. And now, that started back in the 80s. Now projects are very kind of individual, and there's not as many river projects or restoration projects that need to be prioritized. Now we're kind of in a situation where we're maintaining the riparian corridor, but we don't have huge reaches of river that are in really bad shape that need to be prioritized, where we come to communities in the valley and prioritize with property owners. Now it's more talking about, how do we protect the river and how do we take care of small things through this task force meeting, which has been going on now for at least probably close to 4 or 5 years now on a regular basis.
I'd just like to comment that I'm pleased to hear that, and Dave, your comments as well. Unlike the federal government and the state government, at local government, we can make changes as circumstances change, and we can make them in a timely basis. And I respect what's happening here. Thank you.
Other comments? Any feedback on the recommendations here about our committees? It would have do these seem helpful? Are these changes seem useful to you, these recommendations?
Yes, they did. Thank you for doing this. That was very thoughtful.
Okay, if we want to, thank you. If the board wants to adopt these recommendations, there's some follow through that would be required. Staff would have to make some changes to our, the committee charges, and there are two committees where, as you can see, we recommended eliminating because they're inactive. As far as rules and regs, if we ever have a need for rules and regulations committee work, we can create an ad hoc committee at that point. So if we're going to eliminate, so there's a few changes that would have to be made to our committee charges and the list of committees. So the board can decide to go ahead with this recommendation if you want, and then the staff will follow through. Or you can decide to, not make a decision tonight and consider it, and we can act next meeting if you like.
Yeah, and just to clarify that, you could take action tonight to accept 15B, that set of recommendations, or you could just provide direction to staff to come back. But either way, we're going to have to come back to you with adoption of like the formal elimination of the Rules and Regs Committee. So each of these have a couple of pages in the district meeting rules, which either speaks to what their charge was when they were established. So we would redline each of those to line them up. We've already made certain administrative changes, for example, to the Ordinance 152 Committee for when its annual report gets done versus what it was originally written in its charge and so forth. So we just go through each of the Exhibit 15B recommendations and then go to our meeting rules and make sure that they're consistent. So we bring those meeting rules back so you could actually adopt the changes.
I'm sure willing to support proceeding, but after public comment, I would make a motion.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see if there is any public comment.
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 15, please raise your hand.
I'll note because I see there are one or two members of the Ordinance 152 Advisory Panel in attendance that there was a suggestion to have that panel meet 3 times a week instead of 4. We have to look at the committee charge and see if that the ordinance and the committee charge to see if that would be allowable. But if it is, I think Director Edwards suggested, well, we should also let the committee itself, the panel itself, have a say in the frequency. So that's what we would do. If there was, it did seem like a reasonable thing to go to 3 meetings a year instead of 4. The suggestion is to confer with the panel first before deciding.
Yeah, and you have one hand up now.
Sarah, you could share the timer. And John, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you very much. I would suggest if the 152 panel does meet to do its annual report, that January is far too early to do it. Maybe in March would be better. So we have 3 months left before the end of the year, 9 months of the year accomplished. So upon which to base our annual report. Thank you for all your hard work, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you, John, for your comment. Next up, we have Susan Schiavone. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I think 3 times a year would be fine, and I don't have any problem with moving it to March, John's suggestion, if that works for the cycle for the district. Yeah, I think that would be fine to do 3 times a year. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
And
Okay.
Sarah, you could stop share. Sarah, probably didn't see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
Hey, Director Riley.
I move approval of the excuse me. I move approval of the recommendation, subject to independent committees making their suggested revisions at the next meeting to consider that at that time.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on what the condition is.
I'm only addressing the 152 committee, that if they want to meet 3 times a year or 4 times a year. And if they can present an argument for 4 times a year, I suggest that we consider that next time. So my motion is to approve the recommendations of the committee, the district committee, subject to hearing any contrary opinions at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
And Chair Paul, under discussion, I wanted to thank you for putting together the consensus of our committee. You did a really good job of gathering our thoughts. And of course, I was going to say Chair Edwards, I'm so used to that, but Director Edwards also had great input. And I think what we were looking for was balance between, there are times when you do want to have a subcommittee, a smaller group of the board to kind of roll up the sleeves and look at some technicalities. On the other hand, we realize that we have a lot of demands on staff time, and we wanted to be sure we don't have the staff doing the same thing twice. And there are times when things can go directly to the board. So I think you came up with a really good balance.
Well, appreciate your working with me on that. I think everybody had good, it was good working with you on this.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was a good meeting.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, let's vote. Have we lost Joelle?
Yes. No, Director Anderson? Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Edwards?
Yes,
Director Riley?
Aye.
Director Robertson?
Yes.
Director Mallett?
Yeah.
Vice Chair Adams?
Aye.
Chair Paul?
Yes.
The motion passes on the vote. The motion passes on with second and
Thank you. We have worked our way through the action items. Any questions on the informational items? If not, it's been a long meeting, but I think we can adjourn.